There, now it is.
Okay, oh my gosh. Somebody has turned the internet off here at Castledale City Hall, so we can't broadcast tonight.
Oh my gosh.
We can't do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to record it and put it on YouTube. So any of your friends who are not here that would like to watch it, they'll be able to watch it at their convenience. And we'll just pretend like they're watching it live. Okay? And let's see, I got to have that remote. So, we're talking about the culture of the 1950s. And since a few of you would remember some of the culture of the 1950s, and I'm not going to point people out here, please comment on things you might remember.
Barely remember.
Now, when we get to the 60s, it'll be a free-for-all.
Yeah.
But at least in the 50s, comment please on some of the things.
I remember I bought one of those Hubers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one of those too. Especially fully restored, that would be nice. I just want to mention that we appreciate Castledale City letting us be here. And I will talk to the people about making sure the internet is on and working. And again, these are all going to be put on YouTube and recorded on that YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch it. Or if you have friends who say, man, I wish I had seen it, please refer them there. They'll all be there. Okay? And you can get them, they're lined up by the date, so they're in chronological order, but also you can mention them by which Hawaiian shirt I'm wearing at the time. So that can help there. One big reminder, I'll put this on Facebook and wherever. Next Wednesday, no meeting. I'm giving you the night off. Don't waste it. As you know, I'm running for school board, and I think before the election gets serious, I might want to know what's going on. So I'm going to attend school board meetings, and their next school board meeting is at Farron Elementary on next Wednesday. And if you want to come, hey, everybody's invited.
Isn't that Valentine's Day?
That is Valentine's Day, which is if you truly love your sweetheart, go to school board meeting. Yeah. Gwen won't go. She's going to stay home and feel loved that I didn't pressure her into going to school board meeting. So that's none next week, and then we'll go for a few weeks, and then the next one is in March that we will miss when it's another school board meeting. Okay?
There's a history presentation next week.
Yeah, let's mention that too. That is on the Marsing family, and I believe Wade Allenson is going to be speaking on that. And is that next Thursday? Is it this Thursday?
Next 15th.
The 15th. So we'd encourage everybody to go see that. I want to go see that. When my grandma, that I knew very well, Gwen knew her well, when she was 13, her mother got a job cooking at the Marsing Ranch. And her husband had left and gone off to become a derelict and other things. And she had this daughter and then 3 boys to raise. And she got a job as a cook at Marsing Ranch. And Marsing said, you can bring the 3 boys, we'll give them chores, but we're not having a 13-year-old girl down with those cowboys. And so her mother took my grandma to Vernal, where she knew some people, and got her hired as a servant for a family. And for the next 5 years, she did the laundry, the cleaning, the cooking, for that family while she went to high school. And she was about to graduate from high school when the family came to her and said, we'll give you $200 if you will leave school, if you'll drop out of school and move out of this county, because our son is the salutatorian and you're going to be valedictorian, and we'd rather have him be valedictorian. And she could not imagine $200. So she took the money, moved to Price, and became a telephone operator.
Well, that's what still happens now.
And
When
that's,
you go to school board meeting, you
is that going to, I hope not.
never mind.
Anyway, So that was kind of my grandma's story, but I've been down to Marsing Ranch. I've ridden a horse all the way to Marsing Ranch and back, at which time the horse committed suicide. It was very sad. I've got to get a smaller me or a bigger horse, but anyway, I would like to go hear what he has to say about the Marsing family and the Marsing Ranch. Okay.
Oh, also, just to put in a plug at the senior center, I don't know if any of you are seniors, but I am.
Nah.
There's a band and a party and refreshments and.
Next Wednesday night.
Next Wednesday night.
It's a Valentine's party.
Yeah, yeah.
That's probably where Gwen will
Said
go.
they're all out of tickets.
They're what?
So if you don't have tickets,
You have to have a ticket?
yeah, because there's so many people.
Yeah.
Well,
Better get your tickets, Gwen.
I guess we'll have to have a party.
Maybe try to find a bigger.
Well, that's I really enjoy the Route 10 band.
They're good.
They're fun, and they play some songs that Gwen and I like, and it's worth going and listening to them.
Maybe
for
they'll
sure.
find a bigger place.
Maybe. Well, we're talking about culture in the 1950s, and I've really put some time in on this, so I want and I want it to be more of a discussion than a lecture. I know I lecture a lot, but okay. Let's take the year 1950. 1950, some exciting things happened that were going to change everything. One is the first publication of the Peanuts comic strip happened in 1950. That's where Peanuts was born. And this is the first one right here. Well, here comes old Charlie Brown. Good old Charlie Brown. Yes, sir. Good old Charlie Brown. How I hate him. So there you go. That was the first. And it would become the longest running comic strip in history, at least for a while. Okay? Also, there you go. Here's where you blame it. The Diners Club card. The first credit card. Did not come out till 1950, the year 1950. And that was the first credit card, was a Diners Club card. Have you ever have a Diners Club card? I never had one. But that's where it got started. It was quite a good scheme to get you to buy now, pay later, especially for dinner. And it would spread to everything eventually. And then, you may not know that how early this was, but by 1950, Dr. Richard Lawler did the first successful organ transplant. It was on a kidney. And they transplanted a kidney, and it worked, and the person lived for quite a while after that. So the first successful organ transplant was 1950. That's pretty amazing. I thought it would be late 60s, early 70s, but no. Okay, cool. This is, anybody know what this is? It was called The World Is Yours. This is the first color television program. It lasted 2 episodes. That was it. But it started something. And it was run by a naturalist, Ivan Sanderson, and he displayed animals and artifacts that he gathered from his world travels. And this was the first color television show, and that also is 1950. Okay, so everything was kind of black and white till then. Not in movies,
It was black and
but
white.
in television. In television, black and white, until 1950.
How many color televisions
But
were
most of
there?
us didn't have colored
Uh,
TVs.
There were no colored televisions, but they were coming. But there were also just television stations. Just television stations at the start of 1950. Across this nation, there were 20 television stations. But by 1959, 10 years later, there's thousands of television stations. And this is where it really kicked in.
Oh, you mean local
So
stations?
when did TV come to Emery County?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe somebody can tell us better than I can. 55 or 56.
I knew
I
Bill
can't.
Justison did, but I didn't know what year.
Yeah, and to get television at Emery County, we couldn't be on VHF. We had to be on UHF. And it had to be broadcast to Horn Mountain and then shot down here. And to receive it, you couldn't receive it just on your television set. You had to put it on UHF, and then it had a little control box, and you had to tune it in, like a radio kind of.
Well, you had to have the antenna.
And you had to have an antenna, UHF antenna. And I know this stuff because I was the oldest kid in my family, and some people wonder why my family had 11 children. It's because nobody ever bought my dad a remote. So I had to go change the channel, and then when I got old enough, then my brother had to do it, and we all went through that. But changing the channel was not just click, 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 it was dialing it in. And
Just like the radio.
it also helped that I had the touch. But I do remember too that when we couldn't get it on that, I was on the roof. I was up on the roof, and my dad was hollering to a brother who was hollering to another brother who was hollering to me. Try it back to the left again, you know, that kind of thing. And that was TV. However, that wasn't in the 1950s. That was until the 1960s.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And our first TV that I had in Emery County, that my family had in Emery County, was black and white. It wasn't color.
And
Go ahead, Tom.
when did Emery County get more than one channel?
I don't know because
We had 3 channels.
I remember 3 channels.
Yeah.
CBS, NBC, and ABC. And then, oh, holy smokes, as I was a teenager, public TV.
Yeah, we got enough.
And then the next thing you know, I mean, it was like crazy. It was, like Sesame Street and stuff like that.
And they went off at midnight.
They did. And what did they do at midnight when they went off?
They played the national.
They played the national anthem, and then what did they do, Cheryl?
They had this round thing.
They had this round thing that hummed. Yeah. They,
For people who like white noise.
it wasn't? You might have to take your shoes off to be able to count that high. Fingers are just not going to be enough. Anyway, first color television in the United States. Now remember, movies had had color since 1939 with the advent of
Disney.
The Wizard of Oz.
I remember.
And then they had color, but still lots of movies were in black and white because many directors and producers felt that it just was better. And so there were still lots of black and white movies, but
But only part of the Wizard of Oz was.
only part of The Wizard of Oz.
And I think that is a memory I have of, we went to see the Wizard, I think we went to a theater and we were just used to black and white. And then all of a sudden they get to the Emerald City and,
And can we say mind blown?
yes. I tried to
Okay.
explain to my kids.
Well, that first color movie was 39, and so now here we are 1950, 11 years later, and we're getting color television. This starts a big problem for movies. Now, the 1950s is called the golden age of television. The golden age of television. They were inventing it as they went along, but they were doing great. And people still look back in history and say that was the golden age of television. Do you recognize any of these shows?
Oh, Lucy.
I Love Lucy. Oh,
The
yeah.
famous.
The Twilight Zone. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. That's when I liked. And I only got
They
reruns.
were the puppets.
They were
right?
puppets.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
And
Car 54?
I always thought Fran was a little weird, but I liked Kukla and Ollie. Anyway,
Dragnet.
the Honeymooners,
That's Jackie Gleason.
Jackie
I was
Gleason,
thinking, yeah.
and then Alfred Hitchcock Presents. My parents, now all I got was reruns in the 60s, but my parents wouldn't let me watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It was too scary. Nor would they let me watch The Twilight Zone. Too scary. So as I got older, I went back and watched again, way back reruns of them, and I thought, nobody's scared of this.
I watched Perry Mason, and after Perry Mason, the Twilight Zone comes on, but we don't watch.
No way,
No
yeah.
way. They had aliens. Yeah.
And then, of course, Joe Friday and Dragnet.
Well, the nurses and the birds of Hitchcock just scared the bejeebies out of the person.
Have you watched The Birds recently?
No, recently it's nothing.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
But it was,
It was
However,
so scary.
Gwen and I for Halloween watched Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho,
Oh,
and it holds up very well.
They said for years that, was it Janet Leigh?
Janet Leigh,
That for years after that, she couldn't get in the shower.
she couldn't. She could have a bath, but no way was she pulling that curtain.
If I'm in a hotel or something, I don't, motel, no way. I'm getting in the shower.
Scary.
Well,
it's funny what imprints on, I mean, everything imprints, but.
so my brother was telling me a couple days ago about he and some friends went out to an isolated area off Highway 50 and 6 called Gandy, Utah. It's right by the Nevada border. In fact, you can pick up a rock at Gandy and throw it into Nevada. And he said, yeah, we went there and the Bates family was there and we stayed in their motel. I said, bad choice. But they do have a place out there that is the Bates Motel in Gandy, Utah. If Bates Motel, if you dare get off Highway 50 and 6 and drive up 40 or so miles
Yeah,
and
'cause
find
it's
it.
so, there's so much business around there to protect you.
Yeah. Anyway, here's the problem. Do you see the problem?
TV's
You
It
don't?
took away from the movie industry.
It's killing the movie industry because you can stay in your home. And if you remember, do you remember what this TV cost at that time? Zero. Do you remember what the movies cost about this time? Now say it, a quarter.
Oh, I thought you.
And I mean, if you're going to take the whole family to the movies, including Grandpa and Grandma, $16 easily.
Well, by the time.
Well, maybe not quite that high. $4, maybe.
And then popcorn.
We could go down
Popcorn.
on Saturdays and pay a dime and we could watch cartoons all day.
There you go.
Most of the kids snuck in the bathroom window.
Well, there was that. But one of the kids had to pay to go in the bathroom and open the window.
10 cents.
Well,
A lot of-
TV was killing the movie industry.
And that's what did here, the Rocket Theater, after the TV come in.
It was gone.
We have a theater here.
We did, the Rocket Theater. And who attended a movie in the Rocket Theater that can remember doing that? Okay, we got a few.
Barely.
There was another movie theater in Cleveland. It was run by, what was his name? Ernie Davis, thank you. He had a roller skating rink, but then he would do on Sundays movies.
And there was a Star Theater in Huntington.
And the Star Theater in Huntington.
That's the one I remember the most.
My grandpa was the bishop in Cleveland, and in the building across the road was the church, and he preached against Ernie Davis a lot. So anyway, this is a huge problem.
Yeah, most of my memories are.
The movie industry is going to die. Now let me ask this: did it?
No.
It faded for a while.
It did. But then it comes back. You're a movie executive. How do you bring it back? How do you save movies?
Star Wars.
Well, that's not until 1979,
For more years later.
which I watched the first run of Star Wars, 1979,
I waited
on my mission.
I waited in line 2 hours to get into
My
that.
friend's dad had a theater,
Uh-huh.
and he had on Saturdays, we had games and pie eating contests and all of that kind of stuff.
So he's trying to save the movies
Right,
by making going to movies a bigger event than watching just a movie.
right.
Okay, good. Any other ways to try to save it?
They would take your ticket stubs and then you get prizes.
Put them in for a drawing.
Yep.
Excellent.
They did
That can help. Doesn't work?
It didn't work here, because they did do that for a
They
while.
did that here, and the
Rocket.
Rocket was still going under. I remember the Rocket as being an office building.
Yep.
They turned it into an office building.
If I,
You
I
don't
mean,
remember
I
the
do have,
movie counts at all.
I do have to, I'm sure I had to have been once.
Well, I'd like to take a moment, I think the next one, and do an analysis of how you save movies.
Make better movies.
Make better movies. Tom, you're clued in. Good job.
And put color on
Let's talk about a couple of other things. Let's go to 52. Princess Elizabeth, born Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, on April 20, Windsor, last name Windsor, on April 21st, 1926, became Queen Elizabeth II in 1952 at the age of 25. Her father, King George VI, suffered from lung cancer for much of his later life and died in his sleep on February 6, 1952 at age 56. She goes on to be the longest reigning monarch in English history.
90 something.
She was in her 90s and served as monarch for 70 years, longer than Queen Victoria, who was in second place, and Queen Elizabeth I, who was in third place. So that is her.
Queens lived longer than the king.
Also at this time, 1952, Jonas Salk begins testing the polio vaccine on July 2nd, 1952. And it worked. It worked. Okay, now I gotta know something. Do I need to show you?
Your smallpox.
Is it still there?
Yeah,
That's smallpox.
that's smallpox.
never-
I got vaccines.
Did you ever?
Do you remember as a kid when I protested getting the shot and my mom hit me real hard and I went in and got the shot? There were no anti-vaxxers, right?
I ran.
Hold on. Well, I would have liked to, but mom was fast.
But did you all have the sugar cube?
Yeah, we.
Well, this was before the sugar
got
cube.
the sugar cube.
Yeah, I got the sugar cube for polio.
Yeah.
But were there any anti-vaxxers, people protesting the polio vaccine?
No, because they were so scared of polio.
Polio was so terrible, but there still were a few.
And all of us our age know somebody who suffered with
I was a polio pioneer. I got the 3 shots.
Did they make you sick?
No.
Nope, you're okay, good.
And I got the.
I never had any problems with them other than that needle thing.
We had 2 during school, and then the last one, we had to go down to the elementary and get on a bus and go down to the Memorial Hall and get one. But I never had a smallpox shot. And my mom, she had several, but they would never take.
Oh,
But
man.
her mother had smallpox when she was pregnant with my mom.
Oh, so she was probably already immune.
Immune, so maybe that was why I never had one.
Some people that milk cows, got.
Cowpox.
Naturally from the cows.
Yes.
Cause I don't have one of those marks on my arm and I got the thing, but it didn't.
Yeah, people who were with cows would often get a much lighter disease called cowpox, and then when they were immune to smallpox.
No, I can't remember anybody get sick, it just don't.
No, probably didn't get very sick. Yeah.
Tony and Randy.
So, the vaccine was such a major breakthrough. Polio was so terrifying, and I even remember, and I'm younger than many of you, a little girl here in Castledale that had polio, and how sad that was. And
Connie Ware. Connie Ware had it. And she used to tell me she had to buy 2 pair of shoes because her one foot was bigger than the other one.
yeah.
And Randy said,
And Randy Citrus, yeah.
They still some
Okay, here's some other things in 1953. Watson and Crick. You know Watson and Crick? 2 English scientists.
There's only one.
Then they were Watson and Crick, 2 English scientists. They're making a model of what they're studying. DNA molecule, and they figured out that its structure is a double helix. And that happens in 1953. They have figured out DNA. Now there's more to figure out, obviously, but they did have figured out its structure and how it was hooking together. And that was going to revolutionize the entire world of science. Okay? Anybody know these guys? The guy on the left is named Sir Edmund Hillary. And on the right is his Sherpa, Tenzing Norgay.
Mount Everest.
They are the first ones to make it to the top of Mount Everest.
Oh, wow.
And it had been tried many times before. They were on the 9th British expedition to try to get there. And they made it there with, obviously, they had to have oxygen with them. And they made it there, the first ones to make it. And later on, my dad met Sir Edmund Hillary. My dad was a park ranger out at Lehman Caves. And Edmund Hillary came to Lehman Caves. And my dad came home that night so excited he had met Sir Edmund Hillary. And we said, what did he say to you? And he said, could you move and get out of my way? My dad wanted to meet him, but he wanted to get by and go.
Who is that guy anyway?
This, Sir Edmund Hillary?
Yeah.
Or my dad?
Haven't met either one.
He was a British war hero and explorer. And he picked up Tenzing right there, who was a Nepalese from Nepal, Sherpa.
Isn't it interesting now how many people have been to the top?
You can go. They've had blind people go, they've had handicapped people go, and there is a ticket. It's $50,000
Oh, is it?
for the ticket to try.
Does that include your guide? That you have to-
No, this is just a ticket to the government of Nepal to allow you to try it.
And no insurance if you don't make it back.
And lots of people don't make it, and the trail is littered with bodies
Or bad.
of people and yet nobody can go up there and have the strength to bring those bodies down. So instead, they use them to say, okay, there's the guy in the yellow coat, turn right. And they use them as markers, kind of.
That's terrible.
It may be terrible, but if it's between saying that and dying, they would just soon say that and go on. Our son hiked to base camp, where they start from. He took a vacation and hiked to base camp, and it took him 4 or 5 days to get there. And he had to have a Sherpa carry his stuff. And I said, how was it at 18,000 feet?
Wow.
And he said, you took about 4 steps and then 10 breaths, and then 4 steps and then 10 breaths. And he said it was one of the hardest things he's ever done in his life. Know that people start there and climb to the top.
Yeah, that's-
You're crazy.
Yeah, so it's huge getting to base camp. And there were 3 of them that had hired one Sherpa, and one was a lady, and she didn't get close to base camp, and they had to bring in a helicopter and fly her out of there. She had altitude sickness so bad. So there's that. And then, 1953, the advent of Playboy magazine.
Surprise.
That was going to change culture.
I bet.
And who was that on the first issue?
Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. I put this picture of her on here. The inside picture is not as clothed.
Do you have it?
Really?
No, I've never actually even looked at it, to be honest.
I'll bet that,
This is the one I was willing to go with.
I'll bet that particular Playboy is worth a bundle.
If you have a decent one, yeah, you probably could get some money for it.
$100 maybe?
I would guess something like that. I don't know. People buy weird stuff. Collectors. Okay.
Going to the ball game for $1 million. That's insanity.
7,000.
Right.
That's just insanity.
Movies of the 1950s. Here were some influences on the movies, and we're going to talk about them. One was the massive competition of television was going to change how movies were made. It had to. You had to get people back out of their house and down the street to the movie. Next, the Red Scare, space race, and nuclear weapons all were out there. And that was scary. So, of course, they began making horror movies. And will create a whole new new genre of movie that has never been seen before. Whole new genre from the
Was that to get our
1950s.
mind off the nuclear weapons?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was to make the Red Scare not so scary, the space race not so scary, and nuclear weapons, which were pretty scary, not as scary.
That's the only thing I remember about.
Then radio, it's amazing to me as I studied this, radio had a massive influence on the movies of the 1950s, more than it did on the movies of the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Advertising?
Well, advertising, but for the first time, movies began to say, if they do this if they do this kind of thing on a radio program, could we adapt that to a movie?
Well, think of War of the Worlds. That was originally a radio show.
It was originally a book
Oh, yeah.
by H.G. Wells, and then became a radio program by Orson Welles.
And I don't ever remember listening to any programs on radio or anything.
Well, can I tell about your dad?
Yeah, I don't care.
Gwen's dad was getting ready to go to a dance. He was about 13 years old, and he was ironing his shirt at the ironing board and listening to the radio, and suddenly Martians attack on the radio. And he just took his shirt and threw it back over in the dirty clothes and hung up the iron and said, well, world's over, no use going to a dance. And he was faked out by it.
Well, and there were a lot.
Yes.
I had an uncle, same thing, only he didn't throw his shirt away, he took off downtown or wherever all the family was, in his underwear, and telling them that the Martians are here.
Yep, there you go. Well, that was radio, and that can contribute to what's going to happen in the movies. Really, the 20s, 30s, and 40s didn't copy radio. The 50s does. And then here's the next thing. Teenagers with money. For the first time in American history, there is a new driver in the driver's seat of culture. It's always been adults, and usually wealthy adults, who drove culture through the United States, who said, this is fashion, this is style, this is what we're doing. But after World War II, teenagers began to get their own money. They get a job working at the drive-in, heck, working at the movie theater, working here or there, and they had a little money to spend, and they become an economic force in this country. And from the 1950s till today, it is not we boomers that are driving culture. It's teenagers that are driving culture.
I honestly don't remember anything funner from my teenage years than the drive-in movie theater.
Yeah, I bet.
I don't remember.
Did
the
your dad
movie.
know that?
I don't remember the movies. I don't remember the movies. But
She's doing herself.
Yeah, well, that's because you didn't see any of the movies.
I remember sneaking into them.
Okay? So teenagers having money had a huge influence on movies. They now could go to the movies. And then World War II, having been over for 5 to 15 years, depending on where you were in 1950s, World War II had a big influence on what kind of movies you were going to watch. War movies are going to become popular. And finally, the automobile, cars. Cars are going to have this massive influence on where movies are headed. And then the worst thing, of course, teenagers with money and cars. Okay, and that's where Jan here got herself in trouble. That's what
as
happened.
long as I was on my bike, it was pretty.
Yeah, you were fine on your bike, but okay. Competition with television. How do you compete with television? Well, this is one way they did.
Good looking man.
Big movie stars, but they would not let them become television stars. And there was this kind of psychological separation where if you were a movie star, you were a movie star. And if you were a television star, you were a television star. And rarely would the movie people hire a television star to be in their movies. And vice versa, rarely would the TV people hire movie stars to be.
Tommy Lee Jones got his start on General Hospital, as did Demi Moore.
But when?
Later.
Later. This is the
There's
50s.
a big crossover.
This is the 50s.
Those,
Yeah.
Those movie stars' movies are still awesome to watch.
Some of them are.
Doris Day, oh my gosh.
Great movies from Doris Day. Now, she made the jump. She wasn't a TV star. She became a movie star after being, anybody know?
On the door station.
A singing star.
That's right.
She was a singer and made the jump to the movies. Okay? Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Sophia Loren, and Jane Mansfield. All became big, and I could have listed others, big time movie stars.
Well, look, the same thing as selling movies back in the 50s that's selling movies now. Good looking,
Big stars.
sexy, you know.
Well, look at what we had. Marlon Brando.
Yeah, that's not exactly what you'd see.
You don't get sexier than that, do you? Well, maybe when you get to Cary Grant. Or what about John Wayne?
Not bad.
Or James Stewart?
I love those movies.
You know,
Jerry Lewis.
what's that?
Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin.
Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
They were TV.
Later they were TV.
Oh, okay.
But first thing they were
Oh my
is
gosh, their movies
they were singers and a comedy act. And then they went from that to being in movies, making their own movies. And that was eventually there. And after they broke up, that they really became television stars.
But weren't those actors tied to contracts with movies?
They were. And movies did that on purpose. They tied you up in contracts. They paid you well, very, very well. But they were not going to let you go be on a TV show, with one exception. Do you know what TV shows these people mostly all appeared on?
I've got a secret.
Variety shows. And they would show up, and John Wayne would show up and they'd say, well, that was your next movie, it's good. And they would appear on those kind of variety shows, but they wouldn't appear as actors in those shows. They appeared as themselves. Okay? So get big stars. That will put people back in the seats. Get big stars. You want to see John Wayne? You're not going to get to watch him at home. Except maybe 20-year-old reruns or some such thing like that. You want to see the new John Wayne movie? You're going to the movies. Okay? By the way, anybody here remember Jane Mansfield?
I know her name.
She was a blonde bombshell.
I remember seeing a picture recently of her,
And her daughter.
and she looked
Her-
pretty bad.
She was killed in a horrible car wreck.
Yeah.
She was married to a bodybuilder named Mickey Hargitay. And they were breaking up, and it was bad breakup. And she was driving actually in Louisiana in a car and was in a horrible car wreck, and she was killed. And her two little kids were in the back seat, and they lived. And her daughter grew up and became an actress, Mariska
It was her daughter
Hargitay,
that I saw
who is
recently.
Law and Order SVU.
No, it's
She
been
is actually Jane Mansfield's daughter.
really, I didn't know that.
What?
Which one?
Law and Order SVU, the main star of it,
She's been
Mariska
on it.
Hargitay,
She's been on it forever.
dark hair, and she's been on, it's been going 25 years, and she has been on it for 25 years.
She owns the program.
What's that?
She owns the program.
She does. She is muy smart. Whereas, would anybody have ever said Jane Mansfield is smart?
She didn't have to be.
She didn't have to be. You know, a size 39 chest will do that for you. I'm not speaking from actual knowledge, I'm guessing.
But
But
that's,
I bet I'm close.
but that's what they were selling.
Guess what? She was a concert pianist
Really?
and tested at a near genius IQ.
Imagine.
But that's not where the money was. Okay. Get bigger stars. How else? Competition with television. How about better stories? How about better stories? Could you hire people to work on one story for 6 months or more? Well, in the movies, that's what you did. How often did the writers have to put out a television show? Every week. So who's getting the better stories? Well, not the television series. The movies are getting the best writers who are really working on those stories till they have them the best they can make them.
Didn't they just put out a half a dozen or so good movies a year?
They did a little better than that, but Tom, you're right, they definitely cut back on the number of their movies and put more into them. They did, because they quickly, it's the whole formula. I mean, Charlie Chaplin was turning out a movie a week, but none of them were much better than the others. But when we hit the 50s, now you've got to make them really good movies, and you're going to spend some money. So you don't put out as many movies. You may remember some of these. Sunset Boulevard, still to this day, one of my most favorite movies. And it's just,
Was that later made into a television series?
it was later made into a musical on Broadway.
Oh,
Was
okay,
it
maybe,
77 Sunset Strip?
yeah.
Yeah, but wasn't 77 Sunset Strip a TV show?
Yeah.
That-
Yeah.
And maybe that's what I was thinking.
A Streetcar Named Desire.
It's a classic.
Yeah, Vivian Lee and Marlon Brando. This was William Holden, Gloria Swanson, Eric von Stroheim. But Gloria Swanson was a silent movie star who starred in it. And what a performance in a speaking role. John Wayne, The Searchers. John Wayne is going to, he's not going to be the only cowboy star, but he's going to be the king of the cowboy stars. And one of my favorite movies, right? Some Like It Hot. Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, Marilyn Monroe, and it's a comedy.
The famous Marilyn Monroe blown up skirt is in that.
No, it's not in
Oh,
this one.
it's not in that one.
No, the most famous thing here is Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon dressing up like women so the mob doesn't kill them, so they can get away from the mob. It's a great movie. But these were written and overwritten and made as perfect as they could. So better stories than churning out something every week. Another one, to compete against television, go with special effects. Now, we laugh at their special,
North by Northwest.
we laugh at their special effects today, but to the people at that day, that was awesome. And could television afford to week after week after week put out special effects like this? Not a chance. They still can't today. Not week after week. So, Sing in the Rain, real rain. Well, no, it wasn't. It was fake rain, but they could sure make it look like real rain.
Well, I know the other one.
Okay.
Northwest.
North by Northwest,
That was scary.
Cary Grant running for his life from that plane. Do you know how close that plane came to hitting him? Nowhere near. They were both filmed at different times, different places. This is flying and swooping over a corn patch. He's actually running on a treadmill. And as it flies and he falls, and the airplane looks like it flies over him, it's special effects that television couldn't do.
So they had learned the green screen technology by then, or maybe just film editing?
It wasn't as good as green screen technology, but it was pretty good. This was actually on a movie screen behind him. And the director is saying, okay, Carrie, drop.
That's one movie I do remember.
Stunts? He did his own stunts then.
Well, his stunts were like me running right here and then dropping. It wasn't that big. Anybody remember this 1950s movie, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad?
I remember.
Oh my
the name.
gosh. Terrifying. There was a Cyclops. The Cyclops scared me to death when I was a little kid, watching reruns. Cyclops, dragons, two-headed buzzards, a crazy snake lady. And those were all done through stop-action photography. They built models, they moved them slightly, took a picture, they moved them slightly, took a picture. Took months to make these. And the master of this was a guy named, his last name was Harryhausen. I think it was Ray Harryhausen. And he did these for many movies, not just The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, but also The Odyssey and Ulysses and other movies. And stop action was pretty scary to people in the 50s. No way a television show can hire somebody for 6 months to do tiny little movements and take pictures. So special effects.
So when Claymation came along, it was just a continuation, just a better continuation.
Yeah.
What they'd already.
And then we came with CGI, computer generated images.
Yeah.
Which, how you compete with television is big budget epics.
I remember that.
Big budget epics.
All of those.
Ben-Hur. I mean, you got to do something big. And this,
This one bigger than the
this was
Ten
huge. Okay, Ben-Hur. This was written by Lew Wallace, the book that was turned into a movie. Lew Wallace was a general in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, he wrote this story of Ben-Hur, and the people loved it, and they made it into a movie. Cleopatra.
You like that one?
If you haven't watched Cleopatra lately,
Lately, I never.
don't
It's
let
nothing.
your spouse catch you watching it. This is Elizabeth Taylor at her
Worst.
most exotic.
Just say sexiest.
This is when she got with Richard Burton.
Yeah.
Was during this movie. So there she is, Elizabeth Taylor, Rex Harrison, Cleopatra, Richard Burton. Big epics, and then of course the biggest of the big epics, The Ten Commandments by Cecil B. DeMille, and made Charlton Heston from a mild star, a medium star, to one of the biggest in Hollywood by that time.
And the voice of God is from Orangeville.
And the voice of God is from Orangeville. Did anybody know DeLoss? Yeah. He was an opera, he was a huge bass opera singer from Orangeville, Utah.
Real bass.
Real bass. And they came and got him to play the voice of God in that from Orangeville.
Visit Orangeville occasionally.
Tanya had something on her Facebook about
Is he in
him.
our cemetery? He's probably in our cemetery.
I would imagine. And then a great movie, again, a big one. You get big stars, Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn, and you film The African Queen. Now, I kid about Cleopatra and the others. If you haven't seen African Queen or haven't seen it for a long time, it's worth watching. Not too long ago, Gwen and I watched it again.
So it was made in the 50s.
50s, all of these were. But that's how you compete. Have a big, big budget epic movie. And again, as was pointed out, you can't do one of those every couple weeks. It's going to take months to make these.
Well, if God is from Orangeville.
He is.
Orangeville's missing out on a great opportunity.
I agree. I agree.
They don't want to do anything else.
They have a sign there in Orangeville, and they need to put Orangeville City, home of God. Well, we were supposed to be Orangeville and Castledale, but it got switched up. But Orangeville's got the sign.
I guess it would sound really bad if it was that God buried here.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how about this? You're looking for God to come, He's already here.
We found him.
Me and my cousin Brad went by the grave, I told my cousin, take your shoes off. He's going, what? I said, God's buried right there.
Well, I think his headstone I don't think is that big and noticeable. They need to put some Ten Commandment headstones there and go with that.
The tablet.
Tablets right there. Okay, go big budget epic. Competing with television. How about gimmicks? TV can't copy the gimmicks. They're a small screen, they're not a big screen. And so, as people went to the movies, we started handing out these glasses. You know what those were for? 3D, what a gimmick. You can't get that on TV at that time. Let's go to the movies. Why should we go? We can stay home and watch Mitch Miller. Oh, not in 3D we can't, and we're going.
Don't mess with my grandma's.
3D. How about, you've heard of this? It's still around. Color by Technicolor. Anybody know what Technicolor is? It was supposed to be a process by which the colors were more realistic. And so people sold it. Oh, well, we can watch this color TV and it looks kind of bad and the colors kind of change throughout the thing. But we can go down there and watch Technicolor.
It was just color.
VistaVision was a similar thing that tried to make the movies without 3D still appear more authentic, more realistic. Cinerama. This is Cinerama. And it says, plunges you into a startling new world of entertainment. And it was supposed to make things be the proper size on movies. So that it looked, on the big movie screens, if you were to go down by the movie screen and stand by where they're projecting, a person would be the right size of person. Okay? And then Panavision and CinemaScope are about the same thing. Monstrously big screens that wipes out your peripheral vision. So you feel like you're surrounded by the action.
Did you ever go to the Villa in Salt Lake? I mean,
Did you go to the Villa, Gwen?
when it first opened? That's what it was. It wasn't like the big IMAX. It wasn't
Right,
tall.
no, wasn't tall.
It was around.
So far you lost your peripheral vision, yeah. It was either CinemaScope or Panavision. And these gimmicks said, this is a better theater experience than sitting there watching your dumb TV.
Well, they're still doing
Panavision, same
that.
thing, a big, long, wide
They're still
screen.
doing that now with the recliners, and they're so, I mean, it's.
How else do you compete? Especially
Still have to compete.
when you can pay for your streaming service of what it costs you to go to one movie.
Yeah.
Pay for your streaming service for a month and what it costs you to go to one movie.
I feel sorry for the guy who owns the theaters in Price. I really do.
I do feel sorry for him too, but he is determined and he keeps it going.
He does.
Okay? Gimmicks, how about this?
Damn.
Let's talk about radio's influence. Okay, radio's influence. One of radio's influences in the 20s, 30s, and even 40s, you didn't have tons of westerns. The modern western is born in the 1950s. And where that came from? Where did the Lone Ranger start out? Not TV. Radio. Radio. Western started out on the radio. Where did Roy Rogers and Seeing Cowboys start out? Radio. So they began to make movies from the ideas from radio programs. And you've got to understand this too. I think maybe not so much in Emery County, but people still listen to the radio. You're in the 1950s, and you maybe can't afford a TV yet, but you can afford a radio. And so you'd sit around and listen to the radio. Where did soap operas come from? The radio. So, some of these came out of ideas and were big time 1950s westerns that came out of the concept of the radio. John Wayne, The Searchers. Gary Cooper, High Noon. That was a movie. Gregory Peck, The Gunfighter. His only refuge. His only friend was his gun. His only refuge, a woman's heart.
Movies had an influence. I was named after Gregory Peck.
That's where you got your name, after Gregory
Yeah.
Peck. That's
My
excellent.
one cousin was called Tyrone.
After Tyrone Poe.
And our firstborn is named after Ryan O'Neal.
Does anybody remember Rio Bravo? I still own this movie.
They have really good.
John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson.
Yeah, good looking.
Can you tell who they were after? They were after the old folks, the middle folks, and the young folks. And they got them. And then Disney got involved with the Western.
Yeah.
One of their most popular Westerns, they had several, was Old Yeller.
I have to tell
You
you
will
this.
not watch Old Yeller to this day.
You don't?
No, it's too sad.
When we last traveled up to Alaska, it's on Disney Plus.
I'm sure, but.
And I made all my grandkids come down and watch Old Yeller.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
cool.
that was good.
And their parents were not very happy with me because they're sobbing.
Old Yeller.
Still a great movie.
Greg loved Old Yeller.
I love Old
He
Yeller.
had the movie and Savage Sam, and he read the book.
And
he could never find the movie, and he was at college. He was up at UVU,
And
he
still
called
couldn't find
me,
it.
Mom, guess what? The Savage Sam. And he was so excited because he had found that movie. Savage Sam. He loved him.
okay.
What was so intimidating about High Noon was the music.
Oh yeah.
It just carried the
And let me ask you, could television match the music of the movies? Could they have as good a music and good of orchestras as the movies?
I guess.
No.
Surround sound.
And surround sound. Okay. Here's how you compete. Radio's influence, mysteries and suspense. That comes right out of the mystery theaters of the radio.
Oh, I didn't see them because I don't like scary
Oh,
movies.
I gotta tell you, this is one of my very favorites, To Catch a Thief.
Yeah.
That is an awesome movie. Cary Grant, Grace Kelly,
Wow.
before she was a princess. The Rear Window, what an awesome movie there.
That's an Alfred Hitchcock too, isn't it?
That's an Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock specialized in this thing, and others, but especially. This is an Alfred Hitchcock, Dial M for Murder, where she's trying to call for help, and she gets the operator, and she says, I keep getting these threatening calls, can you trace it? And the operator says, well, hang on to your phone and we'll trace the call. And she says, I hate to tell you this, but it's coming from the next room.
Oh, I think I have seen that.
And this is also a good one. This is a cross between a Western and a mystery suspense movie, The Night of the Hunter. Robert Mitchum. You probably need a brother named Mitchum.
I have a cousin named Mitchell, yeah.
Okay, Mitchum, Robert Mitchum. And of course, a young, skinny, hot Shelley Winters.
So cute.
Yeah, sure, she got.
She was in the.
Also then, radio's influence on film noir. Now, when I went to college, I had to study about film noir. I didn't know what that was. And they could have just said, it's detective shows. And the detective show comes out of radio and is picked up here, and they can be classified maybe with suspense, but they always have a detective, a hardcore detective. Okay? So this one stars just a hardcore guy in the first place, Fred McMurray. Well, you remember him from My Three Sons?
Yeah.
And obviously Barbara Stanwyck. You remember her from Big Valley? Okay.
She was a lot younger.
Yeah, she's younger here. Double Indemnity. And this guy, Edward G. Robinson, he was always a bad guy. This one is called Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford. That's a detective movie. And Gilda is controlling Glenn Ford as he's trying to investigate a crime. And he's not doing well because of her influence. And another great movie, The Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor.
Never heard of Mary Astor.
Yeah,
The
Humphrey
only
Bogart.
thing Bogart was good in was African Queen.
What?
Yeah.
Bogart was good in everything he was in, but I will admit he was always Humphrey Bogart. But what about the Treasure of the Sierra Madres?
Casablanca.
He was way good in that. Casablanca. I love Humphrey Bogart. And his wife, a young girl he started dating when he was 55 and she was 18 or so, Lauren Bacall. Bogart and Bacall were in The Big Sleep.
Were they
And
married in real life?
they were married in real life.
I didn't know that.
And he was this hardcore detective. So you fight television, you try to get people into movies by taking popular ideas from the radio and making them really good movies. Then World War II influences help put people in the seats. The Bridge on the River Kwai. Oh, that's a tough movie. It's 3 hours long. It's good.
Good one.
Run Silent, Run Deep. About a submarine captain trying to get into Tokyo Harbor. I have both those movies and this one, Mr. Roberts, Henry Fonda, Jack Lemmon, and it's a comedy about World War II. Who would have ever thought of a comedy about World War II? But it worked. It was excellent. Stalag 17, starring William Holden, who is they're trying to escape from Stalag 17, and he doesn't want anything to do with the escape because he's selling and buying, and He's getting rich off the prisoners. They kind of hate him. And in the end, he turns out, well, I won't ruin it for you. And James Mason, an English actor, who was Rommel, the Desert Fox. Great World War II movies come out of the 50s. The 1940s World War II movies were mostly propaganda movies, a lot of them paid for by the government. They were somewhat shallow and two-dimensional. But in the 50s, you get real World War II stories that are cool. Then here we go. The Red Scare, the atomic bombs, and the space race equals, what did it create? A new genre that we've never had before. It's called, are you ready? Science fiction. Science fiction comes about in the 50s. From out of space, a warning and an ultimatum, the day the earth stood still. You keep sending dogs and things up there, somebody's going to get mad and we're in trouble. The Blob. The Blob. Starred Steve McQueen. Terrifying for a little kid. What a great movie. And this one, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The first one was made in the 1950s. There's been 2 other remakes since then of Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Get too scared.
Oh, how come we're not going? Oh, here we go. Howard Hawks production, The Thing. The Thing, a monster. And they find him while they're exploring in Antarctica, and he was killing people in Antarctica, but he came from somewhere else. And of course, his name was James Arness. Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon was The Thing.
It keeps turning on.
Dang it, come on, stay there. A great movie for its time, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. I don't know why. And It,
That.
but its full name was It Came from Outer Space. I don't know why it's doing that.
The body snatchers are.
And what about It Came from Outer Space? What made it such a great movie? 3D.
I had no idea 3D had been around that long.
Yep.
Are we still in the 50s?
We're still in the 50s. All of these were 50s movies.
50s is a great era.
Oh, look at that.
I agree.
Stop.
I think it's probably.
Cars' influence on the movies. The number one, why can't this stop?
It's probably on the PowerPoint presentation you've got it set on.
It's not PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, I don't know what you're doing.
It's just pictures. The American Drive-In movie, right? And that's where you saw those sci-fi movies. But also, for some of you, yeah, they pay for 5. How many they get in?
As many as it fits.
10. How many can you get in the trunk? Yeah. And creating the drive-in was not mostly a family experience. Sometimes it could be, but it was a teenage experience.
Well, Jan can tell us.
Jan, tell us about
The drive-in that was.
how long did you stay in the car before you started roaming looking for a boy?
The drive-in between Huntington and
I was
Castledale.
with the boy. I didn't have to go looking.
This one right here is Greg Powell's dad owned the Wonder Bread truck and they filled it clear full, not of bread.
With people.
Yeah, we usually went,
And they were sitting on top of it.
no, we honestly usually, we double dated back then, and the other couple was in the trunk till we got in the.
Yeah, to the-
Okay. No, my dad did not know.
Okay, let's talk about a few years. We're going to end a little bit early because we didn't take a break, but I'm sorry this keeps going ahead. I'm kind of tired of tonight.
My girlfriend never got to take the car, ever, and she did one night. And we tried to sneak in the drive-in, but it didn't work, so we had to pay. And so when we got ready to leave, she drove off with the speaker in the
Oh,
window.
I've done that.
Broke it, and she never got the car
I was
again.
having a fight with the boy, and he got
I wonder
mad,
if she can remember that.
pulled away with the speaker. No, we girls went.
The easiest one to sneak in was over in Orem, where you couldn't find it. You Yeah.
There was
They
a whole
had-
social
They had two
experience
over
because
there, and then
you
we
went
had
to-
one in Springville and one in Provo.
Yeah,
Mount Pleasant still has a drive-in movie.
and you still,
And
you,
over in Ephraim. Is
Uh,
there one like
No,
that?
Mount Pleasant.
Mount Pleasant, yeah. I
Yeah.
love to take my
you
grandkids.
had to go to the, whatchamacallit, to get a Coke and.
Yeah,
That way you could,
stand.
see- that way you could see who all was there. But usually the guys went,
I went to the one out here with Mac.
yeah.
Trying to see if I can fix this. Out here at the Huntington one time our friend came with his girlfriend and brought a camper. He was planning on going hunting the next day, and all of the friends filled up his camper. So he took his girlfriend to her home in Huntington, kissed her goodnight, and as he came back from the door, all of us piled out of the camper, about 10 or 12 of us piled out of the camper.
He doesn't dare say on YouTube.
I don't dare say right now, but I'll whisper it to you and you'll laugh.
And she did.
It's one of her good friends.
Uh-oh.
That doesn't seem like him.
Okay, now we can maybe move on. In 1954, the AMA reported for the first time that evidence showed irrefutably that smoking 35 cigarettes a day increases the likelihood of developing lung cancer. They had proof.
35.
In that same year, cigarette companies began to counter that. Now, can you say, well, they're wrong? You could, you're probably not going to get away with it. So instead, here's the kind of advertisements. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Doctors are saying cigarettes are bad for you. Then you better smoke Camels because that's the one the doctors pick.
And Marlboro's is the guy on the horse.
The Marlboro Man. Although he becomes more popular a bit later.
No.
But lots of these are saying, you know, doctors recommend this cigarette because it only has half of the tar of other cigarettes and things like that. That was their counter, which was don't stop smoking cigarettes, just smoke better cigarettes.
Don't,
And
don't
everybody
smoke
smokes
35.
cigarettes.
God, that's just terrible.
Also 1955,
Disney.
Disneyland opens. Woohoo! Walt Disney was a freaking genius. And he was going to make money off this for, well, till today. Still is. And then Disney World.
Better and better and better.
Well, yeah, he doesn't get the money himself, but his kids are still rich. That same year, think of this, McDonald's became a franchise. This man right here, Ray Kroc, he bought out a McDonald's and franchised it, squeezed out the people he bought it from. He'd promised he'd let him in on it, and he didn't. And so in 1 year, we get Disneyland and McDonald's.
There we go.
Now, I gotta say this. Are people spending money on kids they never would have before?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
There's a golden one.
Okay. In 1955, there's the actor James Dean. He was in this car right here, a Porsche 550 Spider. That's a beautiful car, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
This is after he wrecked it.
And
And he was killed in that wreck, and he was done.
And he was just barely at the starting his,
Yeah, I'm not sure, I think he'd only made a couple of movies. And he's killed in this car wreck. You know where he was headed? It was in California. He was headed to a racetrack to race his Spider on the racetrack. And that same year, ironically, C. Hunter Sheldon, that's the man here, invented the first retractable seatbelt, 1955. I remember my parents having a car in the 60s. We didn't have seatbelts. But that's when the first, in fact, the place we all wanted to ride was on that back shelf in the back window. Where if you hit something, boy, you could pick up some
Put
speed.
boxes so the seats were level in the back.
And make beds. Yep. Well, he comes up with the first seatbelt. And this is him hooking up a dummy to the seatbelt as he got older. And The Cat in the Hat is published. It becomes the biggest selling, now there's some dispute on this, the biggest selling book written by Dr. Seuss.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
There's some argument that some of his others might have made more money. But this is what the book said, so I went with it. And this is Dr. Seuss. His name, of course, wasn't Dr. Seuss. Theodor Giesel. Giesel. He was of German ancestry. And he was a young man in college in Massachusetts. And he and some buddies got some liquor and brought it into the dorms. And this was during Prohibition. And they got busted, and he got kicked off of a humor magazine that he had started. And it was the humor magazine of his college. You know how,
Okay, so that didn't happen though in 55. But
yeah, this was published.
That did, but I mean.
Yeah,
if
no, that
but
happened in the early 30s.
Yeah.
And so he was kicked off, but he didn't want to be kicked off. So he used a pen name. And he took his mother's maiden name. And her maiden name was Seuss. Seuss. He tried to tell people, spelled just that way. It rhymes with voice. Seuss. And he always would refer to himself, when he was being Dr. Seuss, as Dr. Seuss. And he was Dr. Seuss. So all of our schools that have like Dr. Seuss Day, they're way off. Get rid of it. Or call it Dr. Seuss, I don't know. Anyway, he went on to become the biggest publishing child's author in the United States with his Dr. Seuss books.
But also, and we'll probably get to this later when we get to the 60s, but a lot of his children's books also became political statements.
Very much so. He was a very far left liberal.
The Starbelly Sneak.
He really hated McCarthy. He really hated McCarthy and tried to fight against him as best he could.
And the Butter Battle book.
He was pretty amazing, but he was political.
But his books were still fun for kids.
Yeah.
Well, I have the ABC one memorized. I've read that.
Well, the one that kind of competes against it, so one of these two is his biggest seller, was called
All the places.
Green Eggs and Ham.
Green Eggs and Ham. Green Eggs and Ham.
I used to make that.
Well, one of the books, they challenged him that he could write it, he couldn't write the book with so many words. He could only have so many.
Okay, now we're back to our problem.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because his were always called children's books, but you know, some of the, I mean, and they were fun to read to children, but he made up so many words that they weren't necessarily kid-friendly for the kid to read.
We will be back next week. We're going to end early because I didn't give you a break. But we're going to be talking, oh my gosh, this is just going to continue and continue. We're going to be back talking next week about music in the 50s. Because for the best music ever, for the
60s.
The week after.
the week after next, yes.
I'm gonna bring my 50s collection music.
I can't. I wish if I were allowed to, we'd be playing music.
Why can't you?
Copyrighted.
Oh, because now you're on YouTube.
Well,
Put it on the CD.
Even when I was on Facebook, you can, even if you own the CD.
Remember when you played that one song?
I played one song and boy, they were shutting me down. And Tiffany had to go to bat for me and argue, and finally they said, nothing else ever copyrighted or we're kicking you off.
Yeah, I forgot.
What's that?
Who's watching?
Who's they?
Oh, there's part-
Well, I'll tell you, if somebody on Facebook was watching,
Well, now that,
and more than that, all of you wonderful people in this room and many out in YouTube land, I know you'd turn me in. Okay, anyway. So we'll talk about music and how, this is the crazy thing, the music of the 50s starts out like the music of the 40s. But kids get money. And adults don't spend as much money on music as kids did. And music changes because of that. Kids drive music. They still do.
I watch the 50s and listen to the 50s and 60s on serial.
But the 50s and 60s was the second greatest music we've ever had.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, no, the 70s. The 70s was the best music. What?
You're just one generation behind.
What? You mean when I was in high school, 1974 through 76, that wasn't the best?
No.
Okay, I've got to argue with you and then we're done by saying 2 words. The Eagles.
Oh, you sound like a liar.
It's over. No, argument's over. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks.
Well, every day I'm good.
Thank you. Colleen, good to see you.
There were some on that side.
How do you turn it off?
I'll put mine back on there where it was.
Just